Hi, everybody, and welcome to the May 2022 Frequency Freaks Workshop. We've got another good one for you today. We've got some great music that's going to be coming after a panel discussion, and the panel discussion is going to revolve around some new gear, an upcoming book, and some studio stuff. With our friends over at Copper Sound Studios. So stay tuned for that. But before we get there, a couple of announcements or plugs, if you will. I wanted to mention that our friends over at the Ambient Ping, they are doing another Drone Day event, and that is happening at 9 p.m. on May the 28th. The link is on the screen there, and I'll put a link in the description below as well. That's happening on Twitch. So you can see that there. And we also have a new album out by, actually two new albums, by Not Your Average Worker Bees. So if you're interested in their work, go over to Bandcamp and check them out. You can either search for Not Your Average Worker Bees or go straight to that URL. Again, there will be a link in the description below. I hope you all enjoy the workshop that we have for you today. So sit back, relax, enjoy, participate in the discussion if you're on the premiere, and if not, we'll see you around. Thanks for joining us. Welcome everybody to the panel discussion. As you can see, I have some folks with me here. We've got Dakota Nolan and Jason Nolan and David Copper and Uwe, and they've got some really cool new stuff that they've been working on, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. The way we're going to do that is we're going to show a little video of the stuff that they've been working on, and then we'll have a quick discussion about it, and then we'll move on to the next one. So we're going to start with Dakota and Hale Systems. Hale Systems or Hale Modular? Hale Modular, right?
Yeah.
Sorry about that. I keep doing that. And let's, those are slides. There's the video, and we'll add the video now.
This is a video to show the tracking abilities of the VC Flu when you're using it as a VCO. So to get it self-cycling, you're going to plug cycle into input. And if we turn this up, goes all the way up, and it goes really, really low as well. Now it's a triangle wave on this output, which is not going to be super audible, so I'm going to swap to the cycle output, which will be a square wave. Now this voltage per octave control, pitch control, is also going to a VCO out of shot, Serge PCO over here, so I'll turn that up.
So that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about what's going on there? There's some cool stuff that I saw there. The thing that really stood out for me is the way you were able to maintain tracking and tuning after you applied the frequency modulation.
Yeah, so the frequency modulation, because the waveform I was using probably wasn't perfectly centered on 0 volts, meant that it could cause there to be a perceived offset, which meant I just had to knock it back down to get it in tune there. So that video was about showing a couple of the different patch programmable things that one module can do. So the module has 2 halves. Both sides are basically identical. I was using the left side as a VCO, and I was using the right side as a sample and hold to randomly address the sequencer and inject some randomness into the melodies that were happening.
That's cool. I was going to ask you about how you were getting the randomness on the sequencer there.
Yeah, the sequencer has voltage addressing, so different voltages will address different channels. And then I was sample and holding noise with the right side of the VC slew into the VC address, which randomized the order of the notes. And the VC slew is the module I wanted to talk about today. And it's kind of interesting that we also have Jason here, because part of the thinking that went into it was from talking to Heidi Chan, who was going through the Alan Strange book and adapting some of the patches, some of which are on older systems that work quite differently from modern Eurorack and modern modular systems. And she was figuring out how to adapt the patches to modern systems so that they would work the same way. And the design of the VC slew is very much directed by my experience with Serge modular systems, because that's what I have my personal system right back here. And that's what I have used mostly for the past couple of years. And that's I really, really love the ideas and the thought that went into those original modules. And when I got to designing my own stuff, it was all about, okay, how do I adapt those concepts into something maybe more modern, something that can track, something that can be used in a harmonic way and not just sometimes be noisy. And yeah, that's how all that came together.
Cool. Let's open it up to everybody else here to ask some questions.
First off, Dakota, that's amazing work you've done. And
Thanks.
Yeah, so how long did it take you to design these modules?
It's been ongoing over the past 2 years, I think now.
Wow.
It started with the sequencer, and now I'm branching out into the rest of the stuff.
And what format, like, does it slot into Surge format or Buchla format, or like, how is it powered?
So I have my own boats that I make that are they're 1 inch deep. They're very slim skiff, like desktop, very easy to be on desktop. I have my own power supply that I use just for my stuff at home. For people who are buying systems, it's recommended to have a tested international power supply, which are available from a couple different people. The format is nominally Serge format, the 4U 7-inch tall panels. It's an adaptation of the original format by Loudest Warning. It's called Loudest Warning format, or LW format. And it applies some of the Eurorack conventions of rails and mounting to Serge so that you can have separate 1 inch, it's in increments of 1 inch. So you'll have a 2-space module or a 3-space module or 4, and it just means inches. You have 17 inches total in a panel, and it's a modular approach to the Serge format, basically.
That's super, super cool. I know that my experience with modular comes from like 5U like .com type stuff, where it's also an inch per unit, and it's very easy to plan a system, figure out a system, and and then what kind of voltage? Like, how would you connect this to? Could you connect this to another system, like an existing Surge or Buchla or Eurorack system? Like, what kind of voltage is coming out of there?
One of the first sequencer boats that I made went to a Buchla musician, and I had to make some little adaptations to make sure that the pulse levels and stuff were correct for a Buchla system. But other than that, it's completely interchangeable. As long as you have a way to convert the banana cable patching to whatever connector the system you're interfacing with uses, the voltages are mainly kind of standard for what a lot of modular systems use. And that gets into why, like I mentioned, I had to make changes and adaptations. So specifically the SSG, which is the stepped and smooth generator in the original Serge modular system, it's one of my favorite designs. It's a slew limiter and it's a sample and hold combined, and they can be interpatched, and that concept of patch programming, you can combine them in different ways to do different patches. The problem with the original SSG is that some of the outputs are rail to rail. So they go from +12 and slam down to -12, which can be a day ruiner if you plug that into controlling your VCA. And there's stories of people blowing the cones in very expensive studios across the room with this thing. So my goal with I wanted the same tools. It's not a clone. It's a remake of the same toolbox kind of thing. And what I wanted was something that can do all the same stuff, but with standard voltages, standard voltage ranges, and everything was controlled, temperature stable, and would track volts per octave. And that is what resulted in the VC slew module.
That's amazing. That's amazing work.
How available are your modules?
Working on it. The first systems have been going out over the past, I'm going to say 6 months, I think, was the first systems that went out. I'm starting with the sequencer-centric type stuff. So I have a sequencer, I have the VC slew, I have the pulse divider, some logic modules, and other stuff. When I got to the point where I could fill a full boat with sequencer-related stuff, that's when systems started heading out, because I really do want to provide an instrument, especially for the first people who are interested in this and who are buying systems, because it's really important to get the feedback on the instrument design and how everything works together. I love modular. I love that you can use it with all kinds of different stuff. My experience with Eurorack is that it didn't work well for me because it didn't feel like an instrument all the time. It felt like a lot of stuff that didn't always get along together. So really focusing on the instrument design aspect of this is what I'm going for.
That makes a lot of sense. I've always been attracted to, I've never purchased them, but I've always been interested in Buchla and Surge systems because of that. You're buying one instrument, that kind of thing. That's why I was attracted to 5U large format. It felt a little bit more, and I know, Paul, you have a similar large format 5U system.
Yeah.
And it feels way more like an instrument. But I'm sure, Paul, you have the same frustrations as I do sometimes. There's limitations in that format, and so that's amazing. That's really cool.
In terms of 5U, my biggest learning was that it's not as voltage controlled as some other systems are. There are a lot of modules that just don't have voltage control where you really want it.
Yeah, every system has those things. One of the funny things with Serge systems is there aren't a lot of VCAs. There's a linear VCA in the top of the wave multiplier module, but other than that, it's mainly audio VCAs that are. There's not really any linear CV VCAs for CVing CV kind of thing. which is kind of funny because we've always heard the you can never have enough VCAs, right? Well, Serge disagrees.
Well, I mean, with all systems, like a limitation breeds creativity. So whatever limitations that has, you go with it. So that's really cool.
Yeah, and the other thing with Serge systems, and the same thing that I'm applying to my instrument design, is it's really going in the opposite direction of where Eurorack tends to be going sometimes, where Eurorack tends to give you solutions to a problem or a module that will do the sound that you want. So kind of contained, and it can sometimes cause less of an emphasis on the art of patching and how to combine many modules into an idea. And Serge is the opposite. Everything is broken down into very atomic subsections, and you have to learn how everything can be combined to do what you want. And that's what inspires me with Serge, and inspired me to try to take it a little bit further and combine elements from Buchla, Rob Hordick's instruments are very inspiring as well, and add some stuff that I want the system to do, because like you mentioned, limitations, some I'm okay with, some I don't want to deal with.
Totally.
Dakota, when you're talking, like some of us haven't got Serge systems or non-formatted systems, and we're a little more conservative. So when you're talking about something that's an instrument focused, my brain would think to my Make Noise Black and Gold Shared System Plus, which is made, it's in a suitcase, it does everything.
Yeah.
And you work with it. And it's a little more like, it doesn't give you a lot of solutions. It is just a toolkit without anything. It'll sound like garbage until you actually figure out what you're doing. But it's still got a lot more built into it than what it sounded like you're talking about. How would you compare sort of what you're thinking about to, say, like a dope for, System 100, their basic? Is that a similar level of tools rather than solutions that you were talking about?
Dopefer also does a good job of having broken down stuff, and you can buy your ADSR and you can buy everything separately. I would say that Dopefer is very influenced by East Coast synthesis and is kind of your more, I mean, there's exceptions to everything, and it all depends on how you patch it. But Dopefer is firmly standing in the kind of VCO into VCF into VCA topology, whereas the instrument that I'm working on, Serge, Buchla, it's a lot more focus on timbral variation, not involving filters, direct synthesis of the timbres that you want. So my VCO that I'm working on right now, and there's not much info about it out right now, but it combines elements of phase distortion and through zero phase modulation to make timbres. And you're actually working with a lot of feedback of harmonically multiplied sines that have different relationships to the oscillator. So it's actually pulling from FM synthesis, Casio phase distortion synthesis, to make timbres that you're not really planning to cut away later with a filter. You're directly making what you want and putting your fingers directly into making the exact thing you want instead of traditional subtractive synthesis.
That's really
Did that answer your question? Yeah. I feel like I went off on the side thing there.
You're giving a larger context for people who don't already know what those, because they're harder to get types of, Buchlas and Serges are harder to access for people. And a lot of
totally.
Know those, the more classic examples.
Yeah, for sure. And the way Serge breaks things down, so I'll give another example to kind of answer that question. I mentioned the ADSR. There's no ADSRs in most standard Serge systems. He does make one. I'm likely going to make one as well, but more often you're working with something that controls the rise and fall of voltages. you're just slewing a gate. The gate is on, you slew the voltage going up to that gate level, that's your attack, and you slew it coming back down. And you're kind of breaking down what an ADSR is into something more basic. But then you also have control with feedback and different ways of patching that you can, you can curve that attack to be exponential. You can curve it the other way to be log. It allows you to just put your fingers right into what you're making, because everything is there and can be patched and feedbacked to everything. And the more knowledge you have and the more you know about how things can be patched, it just becomes extremely deep. And you can just, some days, on good days, it feels like there's no limitations, Whereas with an ADSR, gate in, attack, decay, sustain, release, that's kind of what you're going to get every time. There's less.
Yeah. I'm always intrigued with anybody who talks like the way you are, that there's a danger of failure, and it's sort of necessary to working with these tools. You can get somewhere and it's just going to fall apart.
Yeah.
Things that are always, I'm not interested in anything that's going to sound right out of the box.
Yeah.
I don't like guaranteed success when you're trying to do something, because there's no hazard and there's no risk and you don't learn as much. So, it sounds more exciting what you're talking about. You can start on something and it better be a good day, or,
Yeah.
you better be recording it, because
I guess
last.
You could say, like, with great flexibility comes great responsibility, or something like that. The more flexible a system is, it gives you some new sounds that you might not be able to do with other stuff, but it's going to give you a lot of bad sounds as well. You have to direct, and that's also figures into like the whole instrument design part of it. I started with vintage synthesizers and the very traditional subtractive synthesis approach to synthesis, and it is awesome for what it is, but it kind of limits you. It holds your hand a little bit and limits you to a specific set of sounds. And when you want to have a tool to put your fingers right into the voltages and everything, these systems provide that.
Very cool. I think now would be a good time to move on to some of the cool stuff that other people are making too.
For sure.
Thanks, Dakota.
And we'll get to the book that you referred to earlier, the Alan Strange book with Jason. But I think right now it might be a good idea for us to move over to Uwe with Holonic Systems, and I have a video for Uwe as well that we're going to play. So let's sit back and take a look at that, and then we'll talk about the cool stuff that Uwe's been making. How cool was that?
Very cool.
Whoa.
Throw away everything I said about your wreck.
So, Uwe, why don't you tell us a little bit about what's going on there?
Right, so this was my colleague Mark Medix, who made this in his warehouse studio in Brussels, also where he's based. And yes, this is using two motion sensors called MoveSense. That's two-port. We've supported this already for a few years now, and these are about maybe around $100, and they measure 9 degrees of freedom movement, so magnetometer, direction, and gyroscope, so spinning, and accelerometer, so the position, and it also measures heart rate using a chest strap and temperature. So with this, we can measure all kinds of movement and stuff that's related to the performer. So this is a way of making performances, well, to connect movement to your synthesis, be it your rack or any MIDI synth, or and even host onboard synthesis. So it's a completely mobile system. This is actually the direction we've been taking more recently. How can you bring your synth, your modular, with you outside, or can you actually you can make a patch at home, send it to your mobile device, and perform your patch as you go along your daily activities. So this is kind of our plan for now. But we do provide this also for studio use and live performance. So we have quite a few artists that are working in the context of live performance, and there's a few things coming up this year or so.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was really excited about these. I met you just over a month ago at the Patch Up conference that Jason hosted at Relab, and yeah, when I saw your little toys there, I was very intrigued by them and the possibilities. One of the possibilities that actually jumped to my mind, and it seems like you've already done this because I have a video that shows it, is incorporating that control with a dancer and dance. And as a member of the Canadian Electronic Ensemble, I've had the opportunity to work with dancers before, and the feedback that you can get when improvising with a dancer, and the dancer is improvising, that feedback loop is really incredible. But I think that it would be something pretty special when you get the other musician out of the loop and you give the dancer the control of these things. And so I just wanted to quickly show a little bit of that video because I just think it's super cool. So if you guys will bear with me for a moment, I'll just play a little bit of that now, and I hope you like it. That's pretty cool, isn't it?
Very cool.
She was controlling the lights, as you maybe thought. Yeah.
Sorry, she was controlling the lights as well?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. I didn't realize that. That's very cool.
It's, ideally, you have a light that that spins forever on one axis at least. So, but this one kind of goes 720 degrees and then goes back. So it's not always obvious if our arm movement is controlling the light like this. But there's definitely a relationship. So.
In the first video, you were describing what motions were actually having what sort of responses.
Yep.
How hard does it take somebody to learn that sort of as another instrument? Like, how does it how does that learning of an instrument aspect come into the experience?
The dancer had her name's Anna Sarah. She's worked with a similar system previously that was based on light sensors. So she was kind of familiar with converting movement to sound, and that she was in control of at least certain aspects of the performance. So this is something that a lot of dancers, I can imagine, and I've found from literature also, that some are more or less comfortable with the amount of control that you give them. So others love it. They could run a whole performance without instruction. Others are perhaps a bit less confident.
But from what I heard, what I saw in that video, it wasn't trying to have the same level of control in the second video. It was more of a creative expression of the movement that was generating sound. And in the first video, it was more like an intentional movement in three-dimensional space for the person using the synthesizer to control certain aspects rather than to express through movement. So when
I think in the sorry, no, I think in the first one, in the one with the dancer, there were so many mappings, typically there are one-to-one mappings, which might be very obvious to the viewer what's going on. So she raises an arm, something, a filter, whatever. But moving away from that, maybe the more obvious ones, you can do one-to-many mappings or even many-to-one mappings. But this means it's not always clear what is there is some kind of perceptual correlation, but it might be a bit more complex. So on the synthesis side.
That's super interesting.
And in the first one, we wanted to demonstrate that yes, it's connected both to our Ableton Live integration and our Reactor block integration and to our Eurorack integration. So there were three different syntheses going on at the same time. So she had an idea what was going on, but I think for her to really learn all of that, she did spend, I think, 2 days rehearsing with us for the video. So,
but then it becomes more of like a intuitive creative expression. And I mean, I think that you were even touching on that in the first video and saying that, so that like there may be prescribed motions for this and this, but when it comes down to it, it becomes a little bit more like unexpected combinations come out, or like that's pretty cool too. Yeah.
I want to mention that I think it might have started in the Buchla world, but it's also in Serge and Eurorack, the idea of Krell patches. So self-playing kind of structures of possibilities. And what you're making is such a cool way to explore those structures in a totally new way, where you kind of create a feedback structure on an instrument and then through physical movement can explore the possibilities of that structure.
That's exactly, you really got it, because I always thought that I love Krell, and I thought Krell could be kind of cybernetic. I think the Krells themselves would interact with the music somehow. So this is what's happening.
And so everything is really, every gesture can be reconfigured to whatever you want it to be, though, right? Like what makes me curious is about how that would be useful for me, young children and disabled users who might have limited mobilities, but can still intentionally control something because I want my arm going up to do this, and I don't care how Ove's designed it. Because I'm 5 years old, and you're saying no problem. We could actually start with motion and then decide later what that's going to do if that's something we wanted to do. Yeah,
or you can do the synthesis, and then you can say, okay, these are the outputs that control it. Let's swap it out for like physical gestures, for example. And
so how would you? Oh, sorry.
No. I mean, the way to do it is then you can, for example, you take the sensor and you choose, okay, this position triggers it, so then you press the learn button in the software. But for the user, it might be another kind of movement. So this is very doable.
Well, that's what I was going to ask: is how do you assign So you said that there's a learn button that you can, yeah.
Yeah, I would ideally show you the software, but the mapping section in our software is where most of the stuff happens. So the inputs are usually defined, the outputs are probably also defined, but the mappings are what connects this. So in here you do the scaling of the signal, and you can define, okay, this region of signal is of interest to us, and then you can focus on that, and then you map it to the output, which is usually OSC, but MIDI CC is also doable, and yeah, you can kind of see the mapping page in the screenshot of the.
That's this one here, right?
Yeah. So
It gets a little pixelated as I'm sharing it here, but
yeah. So
you get the idea.
there's a viewer, but that's really just input and output min-max fields. Those are the ones you're kind of adjusting. And there's a smoothing feature, which you might want to use depending, and that's basically it. So, yeah,
cool.
mapping is where most things happen, and at some point you've done mapping, then you can just focus on the synthesis, and when that's done, you can perform.
So what about availability? Because like that sounds great. I want to order one.
Yeah. This has been in the App Store for almost 3 years now. In beta much longer, so it's available. The sensors, we don't sell them directly, but you can order them from the manufacturer, movesense.com/shop, and they deliver usually within 2 weeks, and I think the delivery is about $20.
And we'll make sure we put all those links in the description below, so that everybody has those.
But yeah, the app is out, and that's I think it's between $15 and $20 at the moment. So.
Okay. Can I go now? I want to go order one.
Amazing. Yeah, amazing work.
Very cool.
Thank you.
Yeah, really cool stuff. Really exciting. And you have a way, because it's an iOS app that runs on a phone or an iPad. Is it also available for Android, or is it only Apple at the moment?
It's only Apple at the moment. We did do a proof of concept for iOS a few years ago, but it's a bit of a dismal experience developing for Android. So we dropped it, and maybe one day we'll return to it. But I think most people who do music on a mobile device are really using an iPhone or iPad.
And when you were showing it and demonstrating it to me at the Patch Up conference, you had a little adapter that would go, I think it was Bluetooth into USB, into a USB host module, and then CV out from that module into whatever you wanted to control. Can you talk a little bit about that process? I mean, a lot of the people who are watching this are very much into modular. So figuring out how to get that interface from the iPad or the iPhone into the modular would probably be a good thing.
Yeah, the easiest and the cheapest way to do it is to get a CME WIDI bud. I think that's the one I used. I have all the WIDI series, the WIDI Master and the WIDI Hub. Is it called the Hub? Anyway, those are great. They advertise 4 millisecond latency. In practice, for this kind of work, it really isn't much of an issue in any case, because the human body has a certain latency of its own. When you see it, when you move your arm, for example, a large number of milliseconds will pass before your brain registers there's something wrong with if the sound doesn't fully correspond with that. So one hand, it's a matter of what kind of mappings do you make, or how do you synthesize this, but for practical purposes, I will get the CME WIDI bud. If you need something else than a USB-A, you can always get an adapter. But I also have the WIDI master, which is a DIN MIDI plug, and the hub one is USB-C. So they have a full range for any USB. So for the module, I used Endorphin's channel control, 16 channels, and it's pretty affordable. So, but there are many, of course, options too. So.
Yep, there are.
And even as long as you have a USB or a MIDI in your interface, you can use any of the CME ones, and I think they're very affordable. They're like $60 or something.
Very cool.
And this connects automatically. So there's really no setup or pairing beyond the first time. So it's it becomes a non-issue really having a wireless control of your module. And I love it, not just with this, but it's fun controlling a module from the sofa. So,
very, very cool. Yeah. That's some really cool stuff, Uwe. And I just wanted to point out to everybody that a lot of the people that we have on the panel today are in and around Toronto. And Uwe, you're coming to us all the way from Vancouver right now, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct? Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And your company is actually based in Finland,
based in Finland and Belgium. Yes.
Finland and Belgium as well. Very cool stuff.
Yep.
Cool. So let's move on to Copper Sound now, and we'll hear from David. I'm really excited to have you on, David. It's been
great to be here. Yeah.
It's been a long time since you and I have had the chance to talk a little bit.
Absolutely.
And when I saw you mention online that you were offering these new services for folks, I thought, this is a good thing to bring to the community that we should all learn about. So let me play your video, and then we'll jump into it. Your video does, I think, a fantastic job of describing what it is you're offering to everybody, and not sure how much we'll have left to talk about afterwards. It does such a good job.
Great.
We'll give it a whirl.
Thank you so much, Paul. All right.
Hello, everyone. My name is David Copper, and I'm the owner of Copper Sound Studio in Guelph, Ontario, Canada. I'm a music producer, mixing engineer, performer, and composer. First of all, I want to thank Paul for inviting me today. It's a real treat to be able to talk at a gathering of frequency freaks. Some of you may have seen me give a talk at Toronto Sound Festival a few years back, where I spoke about how to put together a home studio, talked about building materials, how to choose gear, ergonomics, etc. Paul asked me here today to talk about some of the new avenues I've been developing for my studio, specifically my coaching work, and how I continue to collaborate with clients online all around the world, even through the pandemic. So before the pandemic, most of my work was done in studio with clients. And then when the pandemic hit, those of us with studios needed to adjust quickly to the fact that we weren't able to have clients indoors anymore. And even though the pandemic has shifted quite a bit since then, many artists have changed their workflow to be centered around their own home studios, since it is more COVID safe or just more practical. So when lockdown started, I was still able to mix tracks remotely for my clients, some mixing for online releases or mixing stems for them to eventually perform with live. And, some clients would send me MIDI tracks that they had written to send through analog synths, or want me to replay piano part or Rhodes part that they had performed on a VST, run audio stems through hardware, stuff like that. But my clients were feeling disconnected from the experience of working with a producer, working in a studio with someone else. So I needed to develop a better framework to help them more directly with their sounds, their artistic direction, more the hands-on guidance that they would have received being in the studio with me. For instance, when we work together in the studio, you don't just get me as an engineer who can press record. You also get all the guidance I can provide through conversations, such as what kind of sounds inspire you? What other artists are you interested in learning about, learning from? How did say, Alessandro Cortini get that sound, and how do we replicate it? I could help you craft a new effects chain that gives you new inspiration, a new direction, or maybe we need to go deeper. Where are you coming from as an artist? What brought you to making music in the first place, and how do you get back there? Maybe we tweak some lyrics to really convey the emotional weight that you originally wanted to put out there with that song. So I realized that all this guidance that my clients were missing could be offered to them through regular coaching sessions. We would meet once every few weeks and talk about their work. I would help them with their goals, help them learn new skills, and get them to actually finish tracks on a timeline so that they could release music that they had been sitting on maybe for the whole pandemic. So basically, the new coaching sessions have become an open model for whatever an artist needs at any point in their journey to help them get to the next place in their career or their development. It's been a really rewarding practice and has allowed me to work with a much wider group of people because clients can be anywhere in the world and they can be using any DAW or hardware setup. It doesn't matter. The principles are all the same, and I'm able to help them with whatever they're working on. So the last point that I want to emphasize to turn this into something that can help you in your work now is that, to reflect a bit on how the pandemic has forced us all to become so individualized in our art making. We're all alone in our own studios. It's taken a real toll on all of our journeys, stunted our growth and inspiration. I know it has for me, made us feel depressed, and we need to push back against that together. So let's say you and your friend are both tinkering in your respective studios or working on solo albums. Commit to helping each other grow and finish those projects. Become each other's coach. Set a regular schedule to have Zoom calls and ask to hear about what they're working on, what they could use some feedback on, help them set goals, and soon enough, you'll both feel a sense of inspiration and guidance, and you can both achieve some new goals. I did this personally with a friend throughout the pandemic, and we helped each other a lot. We both developed our careers in big ways, and our support with each other was a big part of that. So thank you for listening. Again, my name is David Copper, and I'll hand it back to Paul. Thanks again for allowing me to share some of my process.
That's a great video.
It's so important for people to hear that over and over again. And to hear it from somebody who's already doing it rather than somebody. Like I tell my students that it goes one ear out the other, but they're trying to get to where you are or do things that they'd normally do with you. And they have them reminding them to check in with each other and see themselves as sources of wisdom, knowledge, and experience. And then come to you when they need professional help. But so much of it can be done person to person.
I know that I spoke at the end of the video about a friend of mine, and we coached each other through the pandemic on different projects. And one thing we both talked to each other early in the pandemic about was we both wanted more mentors in our life. We wanted more people to be able to go to, how do we get to the next level in this? How do we do this? And then what we started realizing was, I know like he had some frustrations as he started looking into university advisors, and they were not in touch with what he was trying to do. The age, like there was an age gap, there's things like that. And so then we started realizing like we need to coach each other. We need to look at each other as resources and say like, there's a reason you do something so well and I do something so well, but they're different. How can we both benefit from this? And this is also coming from two people who do like to work alone. And so I think that's a big thing too, especially like from what I know of the electronic music community and people like who work with synthesizers and work with electronic music on their own, including myself. Like, I just like being in my studio and not talking to anybody else, just doing my own thing. But then, do I actually complete projects? Do I grow? Do I, is it still too insular? And this way you can really help each other in those ways. And it doesn't always have to be like, we're forming a band. It can just be like, hey, I'm your friend. I want to hear what's up with you and check-ins and stuff like that. Sure.
That's really cool.
It sounds like for me that's what Frequency Freaks has actually been over the past 4 years.
Cool. Yeah,
Because it's a
that's
safe
awesome.
space where no one's going to laugh at you, and you can come in with the stupidest thing, and somebody will think it's the best thing ever. And anybody who thinks it's stupid is polite enough not to say so.
Well, all music is, I mean, it's all subjective, and it's what's good for you isn't good for somebody else. And having that safe space is huge. And so, yeah, if people can come here and have that sense of community, that's great. I think that in some people, you could have a more hands-on approach with, say, like one other person. But the fact that Frequency Freaks exists exactly for that purpose too is fantastic. So.
Yeah. Wow. Thanks.
No, for sure.
Here. I just wanted to provide a couple of examples that are similar to yours from my own personal experience. Because I do perform in a couple of different ways. I perform as a solo artist infrequently, but I also perform with David Sutherland as Not Your Average Worker Bees, and I also perform with the Canadian Electronic Ensemble, which is a sextet, not a duet. So they're very different ways of working and doing things. The Canadian Electronic Ensemble, for this year, this is our 50th anniversary, actually. Not that I've been playing with them that long, but that it is the 50th anniversary of the band this year. We're releasing a new album, but the way we produced that album is very different from what we've ever done before. We used this thing that we call Pass the Track. And basically it's one person starts and lays down a track, we agree on an order that it's going to go through, and then that track gets passed to the next person and they add their track, gets passed to the next person and they add their track, and by the time it's finished, if you were the one starting, chances are it sounds nothing like you envisioned at the beginning, but it's still fantastic. And because we're a band that is dedicated to improvisation, we had that need to be together to do it, but we found a way around it that really worked well for us.
That's really cool. I think also you're talking about the different kinds of, like the different sizes of groups, from like a solo project to a large ensemble, and the different kind of responsibility that comes in those things. And I think that also can really help inform or inspire other parts of it. So I used to be in indie bands, rock bands, and I used to love it, and I was one piece, and I didn't feel this sense of this is my everything. So I could go and I could play in that band and I could do that, and I could leave it there, and then I could come home and I could work on my own stuff. And those two, they were very different things, but one influences the other. If I only had one, I might be a little bit frustrated that I'm only doing a band thing, or that I'm only doing a solo thing. So I think that having a multitude of, I mean, obviously, like, we need focus. We can't do everything, but if you have, it's really nice to be able to improvise with these people right over here, go perform in this way, and they create a sort of richer sense of it. I also find, I don't know if you feel this, Jason, with your students and stuff, but like sometimes it's really easy to be really delicate about, if there's only one thing you're doing, you put all of your energy and it's really special, and then you sometimes overthink it, or you never release it, or you something like that, right? And where it's like, you know what, we need to keep making, we need to keep creating, and working as a community is really, really helpful, I find, to do that and to actually get stuff out.
Well,
Yeah,
and knowing that we have to put something together for Frequency Freaks in 2 weeks, and we're sort of said we're going to do it, is great, because it does force you to let go, but you're letting go in a group that's going to not trash you for coming up with something that's well-meaning and fully thought out in the moment, but maybe trash after the fact. So you get comfortable with just doing it and the process rather than worrying about the product.
And then you support each other, right? Like you support each other, like you said, it's a safe space to land. So, I mean, that's really great. And then I'm sure that you take that energy and then you go off and do your own things too with that energy, right?
I could never imagine a recording studio having that vibe. Like, I'm threatened by recording studios, even though, you know, it's got such a mystique of production of something that's going to be real and out there, that to break down that stress of that commitment, and as you're doing it, you're opening it up as a dialogue and saying, listen, before you even get here, here's all the stuff you can be doing that's your own self-production in the process before you get there, and then let's start the dialogue. And by the time you're actually laying things down and you get out the old acetate machine and start grinding into plastic, you know, you've already got a sense that you're on a journey, not just all of a sudden just diving off a cliff.
This is a really good point, and this is something that that's a really good point you brought up, Jason. It's a concept that I really try to break down in the concept of what a recording studio can be or what a music producer can be for people. Because so often people have this concept of like, okay, I prepared my tunes, here's the notes. Like, and if you're in a rock band and these are the songs you've been writing, like, practice the hell out of it before you get here, know what you're doing so you're not wasting time. That's great. But there are so many other ways to use a recording studio or to use a producer. I mean, one of all of our favorite producers, Brian Eno, developed concepts of using the studio as an instrument that they're like, not necessarily coming in with a preconceived notion of what's going to come out. And or the idea that like my role with the studio as a producer can be artist development and can be, it doesn't have to be about finding this finished product right away. It can be about, like, I have clients who we've been on several year journeys of trying to help them develop their sound, get to new places, and they make tons of recordings along the way. And but sometimes they come to the studio and they just play with stuff in the studio and they go away with sounds, and then they edit it themselves later, or leaving a lot of room for the fact that so many people these days do work on their own and have their own workflow. They feel a little intimidated, like, okay, but if I'm doing everything on Ableton at home, if I'm doing anything on modular at home, like, I feel intimidated by the idea of going to a studio. Now I have to fit everything that I'm doing into what they do. Do I have to translate it on different instruments? Why wouldn't I just record it at home? And the whole point is, like, this can be a fluid process. It can be something like, I don't ever want to take away from a client what they can do at home, and they should do that, and it's amazing. And so I think that there's a way for that sort of collaboration and that openness, and to just sort of help you in whatever stage you need, and in whatever way.
Yeah, I really like that. And also, like, I don't know if this comes into it, but like the concept of success and failure, like figuring out what doesn't work can be as important as figuring out what does work. And a studio can provide that. Like, we talked earlier about how, having a Serge modular is an unattainable goal depending on where you are in the world. So in some places you're never going to find one.
Yeah.
A studio that has one and you can try one out and you find out it doesn't work for you. Like,
yeah,
that's
totally.
cool.
It absolutely. I mean, I have a group of instruments here that I've curated, and they are things that I love working with. If somebody needs me to do sound design or composing, whatever, these are the things that I love to do. But I've also tried to choose instruments that people would feel comfortable approaching, even if they don't know what they're doing. And so that's why I don't have the system anymore, but that's why I ended up going with 5u.com modular, because it seemed like the simplest approach to modular for a lot of people. Big knobs, big cables, simple VCAs, like that was a way for me to get people into playing with that system. But the rest of the things that I have, like instruments that people love here, are the Vermona DRM1 drum machine, because it's super hands-on. You make a pattern, you change it, you make your drum sounds, done. People love the Moog Matriarch. It's a full instrument on its own, but then we can get into modular patching if you want. And so it gives them that avenue to be like, oh, I wonder, I've never played with this before. And so then it has those elements. So you're right, it becomes a learning process for them. And I hope for my studio, I mean, there's a whole other rant about studio design and instrument choice and all this stuff, but I think that it can be something where you approach it, and on some levels it's really easy to get into, and on other levels it can be really deep, depending on how you how you want to go there. And I hope that people learn through that. I know that I did when I was in my early 20s. I went into studios and I made albums. Like, that was great. But I came away with so much knowledge of like how records are made and how microphones are used and how instruments are recorded and how like the flow of energy in a room and all that kind of stuff. And then I walked around, I was like, oh, like I'm a better musician for this time that I spent in the studio.
It sounds like you also walked away knowing how you learned that stuff and how to help other people learn that stuff, which Jason is something that he talks about a little bit.
Cool. Yeah, thanks. And I think that that's a big thing. I think that it's tough sometimes to reflect after, like, on what we're doing and what we're learning at the moment. But it's been years since some of those experiences, and I tried to think about, like, well, what did I like about them? What did I not? And how would I want to facilitate that for people going forward? So, and Jason, sounds like you have some experience in this kind of stuff too.
Yeah, but I mean, you're just, well, strangely enough, it's what I focused on my doctorate 30 years ago.
Oh,
but
amazing.
It's the fact that every single space that we go into is a learning environment. And it's not just a recording studio or a music store. It's going shopping or going to a baseball game.
Yes.
There's a curriculum about what happens. There's a pedagogy of how you're supposed to interact. And you can subvert that pedagogy, but if nobody's around like you to unpack all the hidden stuff and to open it up so that we know what's going on. And you look at who does that. So with Frequency Freaks, the community is something that Paul unpacks and makes it available. Back when Heidi was working at Moog Audio, it was the same thing. You could walk in and say, modular, what? And she would be there and she would unpack all of the elements. And have somebody doing that for a studio environment is something that people should really be looking for. Even if they're not out in Guelph or can't come into work with you, that they should be looking for this sort of thing and this type of opening up of and sharing of your experience to help people move along to the process so that they don't have these unrealistic and unattainable expectations of expertise and perfection and knowledge, but feel comfortable with that community-based fumbling and failure and exploration that you want them to have based on your video, which is great.
That's great, Jason. I totally agree. And I'm going to be putting out more content over the next while, blog posts, video stuff, explaining more about where I'm coming from. I mean, the talk that I had at Toronto Sound Festival a few years ago was definitely like a start in this world of thinking about, I guess, what sometimes you also don't realize, the knowledge that you have and how other people can really benefit from it. You just go about your day and you're like, well, this is what I do. And then you realize, wait a second, I'm doing things in a certain way and that maybe I can help other people. And I think that that's really cool. Yeah.
Awesome stuff. So we've got one more thing to talk about, and this is the stuff that Jason and Heidi have been working on. I feel very fortunate that Jason was able to join us here today, because this one is really special. I'm not going to talk much about it. I'm just going to play the video.
Neither am I. I don't have to.
And we'll play the video, and it's a longer video, but I think it's well worth it. So let's.
And this is still a draft video, so we're still editing it as we speak. But here's where we are now.
I'm glad we get the sneak peek because, frankly, this is pretty awesome.
Hi, this is Walker from Make Noise, and I want to let you know about something I'm very excited for. If you've been watching our channel for a while, you probably remember the series Strange Patching, which is a series of videos based on patches from the classic book Electronic Music, Systems, Techniques, and Controls by Alan Strange. The book was first published in 1972, and a massively expanded second edition followed in 1983. Ever since then, it's been out of print. So even as modular synthesizers saw a resurgence in popularity and something of a renaissance in designs, it has been very difficult for people to access what remains the most classic and thorough book on the topic. A few years ago, we decided to share some patches from the book in the video series Strange Patching, with the hope that the book might eventually see a reprint. And now, thanks to the hard work of Jason Nolan and Heidi Chan from the Relab at Ryerson University, and the guidance of Alan's partner, Pat Strange, it is finally going to happen. Here it is. The brand new reprint of the second edition of Electronic Music, Systems, Techniques, and Controls. This new edition contains every single word from the second edition, as well as all the diagrams newly restored to be even more detailed than they appear in the second print edition. Electronic Music, Systems, Techniques, and Controls is an exhaustive overview of the state of the art of electronic music as it existed at the time it was written. It contains countless, richly diagrammed patch examples, both illustrative and creative. Additionally, there are a number of full scores of compositions, like Alvin Lucier's Music for Solo Performer and Douglas Leedy's In Tropical Paradise, complete with detailed commentary and diagrams. Although the focus is on modular synthesizers, You will also find lots of information on other studio elements such as mixers, recording, tape loops, and more. Even if you create music in a more modern studio setting, Strange's text is so detailed and readable in its explanation of how things work that it's hard to imagine any synthesist who wouldn't get something out of it. This edition also features a brand new preface by Stephen C. Ruppenthal, who played with Strange and Don Buchla in the Electric Weasel Ensemble. A Kickstarter has been created to fund the publication of this book, and will not be used to turn a profit. Instead, the funds will be used to support community-based electronic music activities for children and youth, through donations to organizations such as the Canadian Accessible Musical Instrument Network, Afro-Rack, and similar groups throughout the US and Europe. Check the FAQ on the Kickstarter page for reward tier information. This is a long-awaited opportunity to get our hands on a new, lovingly crafted edition of a true classic. Please consider adding a copy to your collection.
Yay!
Wow.
Sorry, I was on
Congrats.
mute there. Yeah, that's awesome.
That's
I'm
Oh,
so
no, wait.
excited.
I'm excited
That
about
book
that.
looks amazing.
wow.
It's
I'm really
taken
looking forward to it.
4 years to get this far.
Yep.
Luckily, it wasn't full time. But it's funny because David, the reason I'm doing this is because I got back into electronic music 4 years ago after being out of it since the early '80s, and everyone was teaching me so much, and like Frequency Freaks and Mod Wiggler and the Facebook groups, and people would come in and help, and I had nothing to give back, and I wanted a copy of this book, and I got the PDF and said, well, why don't I do that? Because I couldn't contribute. I couldn't imagine contributing any other way to the community at that time. And I understood books and I understood publishing stuffy, like in general. So I said, like, just leap straight into it. And it turned out that it's something that I was in a unique position to do that no one else could do. First thing we did was we actually, working with librarians at the university library, they actually helped the family get control of the copyright again. Because
Whoa.
I was trying to license it from a company that owned it, who bought the company that published it. And they wanted a pile of money. And the librarian who was helping me says, no, they don't have a right to own it. It should go back to the family. So the university got it back to them, and then we licensed it from them. So they still own the copyright, and they've licensed it to us for this Kickstarter. And
That's
again, it's
super cool.
not exclusive, so they can do whatever they want with it. But this is just a great way to get it out to the community and get people to know about it. And like I said, and the funds that are going to be generated from it are going to be going out to the Canadian Accessible Musical Instrument Network. And that also, right now we're working with a group in Brooklyn, who's going to be one of the main new supporters. Willie May School of, I forgot what it was. I'll dig it out. So there's more groups we're going to be hopefully working with, giving money to them to actually then do workshops for children and youth and marginalized communities to get them to have access to electronic materials and stuff. So it's really exciting to get it out. And Paul just put up the URL at the bottom for signing up. Last time I checked, almost 1,800 pre-orders have been made already. Those are people we're not taking orders, but I said fill out the form and tell us what you want, so we can budget better and figure out how we're going to do with shipping and all that sort of thing. And 1,800 people have said I want a 1 or 2 or 3 copies. So it looks like it's going to be successful no matter what.
I think I filled out the form twice, so it might actually be $17.99.
I know, but you're going to want more than one anyway. There's
I
more
am
than
actually.
One for every room.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, a lot of people, like we're going to be doing a PDF that's actually, it's going to be password protected to you. So if Dakota wants to give away his, it has to put his password into it. So I can't stop people from giving it away, but we'll know who gave it away. I really want some money to go back to the family, and I do want some money to go out to the community. So that's why we've got a little bit of homespun DRM on it. And then there'll be a lay flat soft cover version for the workspace, and then a hardcover version for you to keep, somewhere nice and keep in good condition.
Oh, that's
And then of course you could get all 3 and get a deal on it.
That's really smart.
Have you guys figured out any pricing yet?
No,
Okay.
because I've not really gotten my head around shipping yet. And I just heard back from the family about what they wanted the pricing to be at. And so we're trying to work out something in that sort of neck of the woods. I would like it to be the PDF to be very accessible, like definitely under $20.
Mm-hmm.
I want the hardcover to be soft cover to be definitely, and it should be way under $40, and the hardcover to be under $50. But I have to work out
all very
that's gonna
reasonable
work.
prices.
Oh yeah. And in the end, I'd like to be able to, send out school sets for just a nominal charge. You need, all you've got here, buy 25 copies and we'll charge you, $100 for it or $50 for it, so you can get the school set that people could use.
Well,
there's important.
There's a huge range of what looks affordable compared to getting your hands on an original copy.
Yeah.
Yep.
Because what if they hit the crazy prices? Well, because it's such a resource, and it's one of the most focused and thorough things that goes through, like how to use modular everything.
Yeah. A funny thing is, a lot of people on ModWiggler have been saying, "Yeah, that's great that you're doing wonderful. What about this book? What about this book? What about this book?" So I'm curious as to see when this comes out. There may be actually interest in getting more of these books out in a bit of a series that can be organized and coordinated. That and some people still may own the copyright, or a company may. We could license it. So I'm curious to find out people who might come out of the woodwork who want to champion another book, and maybe there's more things that we can do with it to get a whole sort of bit of a catalog that's been missing out there.
Has anyone said the E word? Electronotes?
It's come up.
Yeah.
And I'm only partially aware of that whole thing. But one of the things is to kickstart to buy somebody out. If somebody's got a whole bunch of stuff that they own copyright for, why not get a whole bunch of people to kick in a couple of bucks to say, we're going to buy the copyright from you and just make it free to everyone on the internet. Listen, at a university, they could actually donate the copyright to the university and get a big tax deduction as well. So there's some options that could happen, but I've not thought that far ahead.
Yeah. Speaking of universities, there's one thing that we should probably mention, and that is that at the beginning of the video there, it still showed the name of the university you work at as Ryerson. Yeah. And so I just want to give you the opportunity to tell everybody about the name change and what the new name is and all that.
Well, TMU, for me, it's like too much university because we're just great. We've changed the name from, somebody did immediately tell me that I should change the lab name to Toronto Metropolitan Institute, so it would be TMI. But that was a guy at another university, obviously. Yeah, so this has been a discussion that's been going on with the university due to the Truth and Reconciliation Committee recommendations over the past 4 years, and they finally came up with a renaming of Toronto Metropolitan University. And you should look up some of the links to discuss how this whole process happened and the community outreach and the leading role that Indigenous faculty at the university played in leading the discussion. And I really think it's interesting that we came up with, unexpected to me, this Toronto Metropolitan University. But it really speaks to what Ryerson tries to be, which is community focused, hands-on focused, practically focused, social innovative school. So I think it's going to be a really interesting thing to see how the university rethinks itself and regrows after this.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Jason.
Yeah.
And I think we're coming up to time. So I just wanted to reiterate that we'll have links in the description below for the work that everybody here is doing. Give each other, please, a big hand, because the stuff that you guys are doing is pretty darn cool. And thanks for joining us for this panel
thanks,
discussion.
Paul, for doing pretty damn cool stuff.
Thank you, Paul. This was.
Thank you, Paul.
Yeah,
Thank
absolutely.
You. Thank you.
Oh, you know what? You asked me about the thing I'm building. There's one sitting right here. You want me to just hold it up for the camera for a second?
Yeah,
do that.
Oh,
Nice.
Wow, that is a slim boat.
yeah, super slim.
So these are my designs in this, and it's an inch deep, and everything fits in this little This little skiff.
Oh, that's amazing.
That's very cool.
I also think so often about modular systems of taking up my entire studio, and you know, to have something like that, it like just could sit on your desk and be like an entire instrument right there. That's fantastic.
Well, that was one of the other pushes for this, was I wanted something I could actually take places with me that also wouldn't take up too much space where I live, and that wouldn't give me panic attacks like bringing that anywhere does.
Oh, I bet.
Do you have a sense of what the final sort of price point will be? Because this is very, you know, boutique and very custom thing you're doing.
I link my pricing directly to my material costs. So I kind of have a like this instrument that I just put on the camera. I think these ended up being below $2,000 Canadian.
Oh, that's actually pretty reasonable for. So and what comes in, say, that instrument? The sequencer and
yeah. So it's let's see here. So it's a sequencer. It's a pulse divider and universal logic block, which gives you kind of all of the logic outputs for 2 inputs. A VC slew, which is your sample and holds and your glide portamento, and it's can also serve as a voltage controlled oscillator and all kinds of things. And this one has a resonant EQ, 10-band resonant EQ in it as well, and then your power input and a little extra comparator in the power input.
But
there.
like a full that creates sound, that sequences sound, that's a full system, or do you still need something else for your oscillators or?
Yeah, so that's basically a sequencer.
That's the sequencer, and then you would use that to. Okay, amazing.
You'd have another one with your sound generating stuff on it.
Super reasonable. Totally.
Yeah,
reasonable.
but I mean, as we saw in the video, the VC slew can be used as an oscillator that tracks. So, you know, you can start making sound just with that boat.
You can, because you can use one side as a VCO and the other side as a VCA or a VCF if you know how to patch it.
Cool.
That's wonderful. I can't wait to get one.
Awesome, guys. Thanks for being here. We're going to end it here, and we'll be talking soon.
Great.
Thanks a lot, guys.
See everybody.
Thank you, everybody.